I've worked in the operating room for over 18 years. Long shifts, high stakes, razor-thin margins for error. In here, precision isn't just expected, it's mandatory. There's no room for superstition, no space for imagination to run wild. You focus on the patient, the instruments, the sterile field, and nothing else. But that night made me question everything I thought I knew. It was just past 2 a.m., during one of those late-night emergency cases you never really prepare for, but have to be ready to handle anyway. The kind where the call comes in while you're sipping cold coffee, and 5 minutes later you're throwing on your surgical gown and mentally walking through the steps before the patient's even wheeled in. It was a middle-aged man, motor vehicle accident, unstable vitals, blunt abdominal trauma. Fast exam showed free fluid in the abdomen. Possible splenic injury, maybe liver, could be both. It was going to be fast, dirty, and critical. The team assembled quickly. Dr. Morgan, our trauma surgeon, was leading. He's usually calm and methodical, never lets adrenaline show. I'd worked with him dozens of times. I was circulating. Jenna, our scrub tech, was prepping the instrument trays. We had one anesthesia provider at the head and a surgical resident assisting. The room was cold, they always are, and quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitors and the low murmurs of pre-op checks. Lights overhead were bright and clean, everything sterile, controlled, familiar. We had the patient draped out and prepped. Midline incision. Once Dr. Morgan was in, it became clear the liver was the problem. There was active bleeding from a branch of the hepatic artery. The suction sounded like someone slurping from the bottom of a milkshake. Thick, wet, constant. I was already hanging the second unit of blood when I noticed Jenna pause. She was standing at the back table, organizing clamps. I saw her stop mid-reach, shoulders stiff. She looked over her shoulder toward the far corner of the OR. Then she turned to me and mouthed, "Did you hear that?" I shook my head. She looked unsettled but kept going. I thought maybe she'd heard someone talking in the hallway. OR doors aren't perfectly soundproof, and sometimes PACU noise bleeds through. About a minute later, she froze again. This time, she looked at me wide-eyed and whispered, "Someone said that's the wrong artery." Now I know Jenna. She's a no-nonsense tech. Ex-military, grounded, steady hands, steady nerves. She's not someone who startles easy. But that look, it stuck with me, like something cold ran under her skin. I started to walk toward her, but before I got more than 2 steps, I heard Dr. Morgan mutter something under his mask. "Damn, wrong branch." His tone was tight, almost angry at himself. He clamped, then immediately shifted position. A rush of blood had surged from a deeper vessel, smaller but deceptively placed. One of the hepatic artery branches had been misidentified. Not a catastrophic error, but one that could have cost minutes we didn't have. He corrected it quickly, controlled the bleed, sutured. We stabilized the patient and transferred him to ICU within the hour. Back in the cleanup phase, Jenna came up to me again. Her hands were shaking slightly, even though she tried to act casual. "I swear to God," she said, "I heard a man whisper it, right behind me, low, like he was standing just over my shoulder." We checked the OR recording afterward. We have internal cameras for review, mostly wide angle. Nothing unusual, no movement, no audio picked up any voice except ours. No one else had entered, not during the moment she described. She even asked the anesthesia doc and the resident if they had said anything. They both denied it, completely confused. Later that week, in a quieter moment, Dr. Morgan pulled me aside. "I didn't want to say this in front of the others," he said, "but the second I felt resistance on the clamp, I had this weird moment, like someone was standing just behind my left shoulder, watching, not threatening, just present." He shook it off, called it a sleep-deprived hallucination, but I knew he wasn't the type to admit something like that unless it unsettled him deeply. It wasn't the first time that OR felt strange. Over the years, little things had happened. Missing instruments found in odd places, power flickers, always blamed on maintenance, monitors that restarted for no reason. But this was different. What stayed with me wasn't the whisper itself, it was what it said. "That's the wrong artery." And the fact that it was right. We never told the patient's family, obviously. No reason to. He survived, made a full recovery. Last I heard, he walked out of rehab a few months later. But Jenna won't prep trays alone in that OR anymore. And I can't say I blame her. Because in a room designed to be sterile, logical, and tightly controlled, something else was watching, and it knew. Hello friends, and thank you so much for tuning in. A special shout out to our incredible subscribers. Your support keeps these creepy, fascinating, and sometimes even comforting stories alive. But here's something to think about. Only about 30% of our viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, hitting that subscribe button helps more than you might realize. It only takes a second, but it makes a world of difference. While you're at it, a like and share go a long way in keeping these eerie tales coming. Thank you again for being part of this journey. You're the reason we're here. See you in the next one, if you dare. Every OR nurse has at least one moment they carry with them long after a case ends. Not because of the blood loss, the trauma, or even the death, but because something happened in that room that didn't follow the rules, didn't follow science, didn't belong. This was one of those moments. It was a routine laparotomy, or at least it started that way. Mid-afternoon case, a middle-aged woman with chronic abdominal pain, suspected bowel obstruction. CT had shown some questionable loops in the small intestine, so surgery was scheduled to explore and relieve the obstruction. Dr. Hayes was leading. He's a quiet, efficient general surgeon, not easily rattled. I was circulating that day. Natalie was our scrub tech, sharp, detailed, the kind of person you want next to you when count matters. We had 2 residents assisting and one of our regular CRNAs managing anesthesia. Solid team, no drama, room was turned over on time. Our counts were clean, sponges, sharps, and instruments. We counted gloves, blades, even towels. Everything was accounted for, double-checked, and signed off. Nothing unusual. The patient was anesthetized and prepped. Drapes were up, instruments were opened, and the case had just started. They had made the incision just a few minutes in when I saw Natalie hesitate. She wasn't someone who froze, but this time her hands hovered just above the back table. I could see her eyes narrowing behind her face shield. Then she looked at me, not panicked, just confused in a way that instantly got my attention. I stepped closer. She leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Did you put a glove here?" I didn't understand. I leaned in to look, and that's when I saw it, a surgical glove, latex, powdered, size 7.5, sitting flat on the sterile instrument table, laid out perfectly, not crumpled like it had fallen, not bunched up like someone tossed it. It was shaped, rounded, as if someone had already worn it, carefully taken it off and placed it down with intention. And no one had touched that table since the trays were opened. Everyone was scrubbed in. No circulator is allowed to breach the sterile field. And I knew, with absolute certainty, I had not placed that glove. Natalie hadn't either. She had opened the instrument packs, done her checks, and remained scrubbed. Once we're scrubbed and gloved, we don't reach back for extras. Any additions are called for, handed sterile, and documented. I stepped back and immediately called a pause. Hold the case. Possible breach in sterile field. Dr. Hayes stopped suturing. He looked up, confused. What's wrong? Unaccounted glove on the field. The air in the room changed. A silent shift. That moment when every team member knows protocol just got real. We had to break and reset the entire sterile field. Instruments were pulled, drapes replaced, a new setup was ordered, re-prep, re-drape, recount. It cost us time, and when you're under anesthesia, time matters. The worst part, the glove matched our stock, the same box, the same lot number, but it wasn't part of the documented count. I reviewed the room footage afterward, nothing. The camera angle didn't catch the exact placement, just the initial table setup. And when the trays were opened, that glove wasn't there. No explanation. Natalie asked if I had seen anyone sneak in. Of course not. Or doors or badge access. Audible when they open. The room had been closed, sealed, and under controlled access from pre-op to incision. Dr. Hayes didn't say much afterward, just a tired sigh and a, "Let me know if you find anything in the report." We didn't. That glove never made sense. No one owned up to placing it. No one even tried to rationalize it. Because to explain it would mean admitting something we weren't ready to face. Now every time I set up a case, every single time, I glance at the sterile table with a little more caution. Because I know what's supposed to be there. I count what's supposed to be there. And sometimes, something else shows up. We never talk about it in the break room. You'll never hear it come up in huddles or audits. But if you look close enough, you'll notice how some of us check the glove count more than once now. You'll see how a few of us hesitate before turning our backs on a sterile field, even for a second. Because once something breaks your sense of control in the OR, even something as small as a glove, you realize just how thin the line is between order and something else. And it's not a line I like crossing. Not in this room. Not where everything is supposed to be exact. Some mistakes stay with you. Not because anyone did anything wrong, but because what happened shouldn't have been possible. It was a standard exploratory laparotomy. Middle-aged male, late 50s. He'd come in with severe abdominal pain, distension, nausea. The imaging was inconclusive, but clinically it pointed toward a bowel obstruction, possibly strangulated. Time-sensitive, but not chaos. We'd seen worse. Dr. Shah was lead surgeon, highly skilled, meticulous. I've worked with her long enough to know she doesn't cut corners, ever. I was circulating. Our scrub tech Julian was sharp and methodical. The rest of the team was solid. Anesthesia, 2 residents assisting, 1 observing. No red flags, no short staffing, just another case on the board. We got the patient on the table, anesthesia induced, prepped, draped, midline incision just below the umbilicus. As soon as they opened, it was clear, ischemic bowel segment. They'd have to resect. Nothing overly complex, but we knew we were racing against tissue death. About 30 minutes in, the mood shifted. Julian calmly but firmly called, "Scalpel blade just snapped." Everything paused. This happens sometimes, less than you'd think, but not unheard of. The blade had fractured at the base of the number 10 tip. Clean break, the handle still in his hand. The tip, gone. Standard protocol kicked in. We scanned the operative field visually, flushed with saline, suctioned, checked retractors, wound edges, under the mesentery. No sign of the missing fragment. We called for intraoperative X-ray, negative. Still, we delayed the close, rescanned the cavity, ran loops of bowel with gloved fingers. Dr. Shah was calm but focused. No one wanted to leave anything behind, especially not a metal blade fragment. But at a certain point, the decision had to be made. The wound was clean, no bleeding, patient was stable. After the second X-ray came back inconclusive, she made the call to close. The post-op report was documented thoroughly. We were honest. We explained everything to the family, who were surprisingly understanding. Legal got involved, of course. Risk management followed up, but over time it faded from memory, until 3 months later. Same patient, new admission. This time it was lumbar pain. Deep, unrelenting. Nothing musculoskeletal, no trauma. Labs normal. The ED doc ordered a CT. And that's when they found it. A metallic object, just left of L3. Roughly the size and shape of the missing scalpel tip. Radiology flagged it immediately. No abscess, no inflammation, no scar tissue. Just there, lodged next to the spine, floating cleanly, almost surgically positioned. He was transferred back to our unit. Dr. Shah reviewed the scans herself and was quiet for a long time. I stood with her, watching the screen. It didn't make sense. If it had migrated, it would have torn something. Mesentery, fascia, nerve endings. But this fragment, it was embedded in a way that looked intentional. And here's what chilled me. There was no surrounding tissue reaction, no encapsulation, no immune response, no infection. It was as if the body had accepted it, or like it had never been foreign to begin with. Neurosurgery declined to remove it. Too risky, too close to the nerve roots. Patient agreed to conservative management. Monitoring, pain meds. That was the last I saw of him. But I kept thinking back to that OR table, to that moment when we stopped, flushed, scanned, and still came up empty. That room was quiet, controlled. There were no errors. Every hand moved with purpose. Every step was documented. Every protocol followed. And yet, something vanished right in front of us and came back where it never should have gone. We stopped using that scalpel brand afterward, not because it was defective. No one proved that. But the OR nurses on my shift all agreed, quietly, that we didn't want to risk another one disappearing. Sometimes in surgery, we talk about phantom findings, shadows on a scan that turn out to be nothing. This wasn't that. This was real. And the scariest part wasn't that we lost something. It's that something else found it and chose where to put it, deliberately. There are certain things about working nights in the OR that most people never understand. It's not just the exhaustion or the isolation or the way time starts to feel suspended between cases. It's what happens in the silence, when the halls are too quiet and the fluorescent lights hum just a little louder than they should. That's when the strangeness creeps in. And that night still sits heavy with me. We had a case scheduled, a liver resection, fairly complex but not rare. It had been on the books for a week, elective but urgent. The patient was prepped and waiting in pre-op. Labs were in range, imaging reviewed, anesthesia standing by. Everything had been reviewed the evening before. Dr. Barrett was the lead surgeon assigned, one of our best hepatobiliary specialists, known for being punctual, precise, and calm under pressure. Always wore a Navy surgical cap and brought his own music to play during longer procedures. You knew when he was in the building. He had a presence. But that night, he wasn't coming. We got word from charge at around 2:10 a.m. that he'd called out. Family emergency. Something about his daughter. I didn't get all the details, but the call was documented, time-stamped. His location confirmed by toll booth footage and later a gas station security cam. Somewhere nearly 2 states away, no confusion, no miscommunication, he was out of town. So the case was put on hold while we scrambled for coverage. A backup surgeon was contacted and we started delaying the schedule. In the meantime, I was tasked with checking supplies in OR 6, the room originally prepped for Dr. Barrett's case. At exactly 3:15 a.m., I got a call from security. The voice on the other end was calm but unsure. "Hey, just letting you know, I saw Dr. Barrett walk past the east door corridor entrance about 2 minutes ago. I thought he called out." I stopped, blinked. "No, he's out of town." Pause on the line. "Well, I don't know what to tell you. I saw someone who looked exactly like him. Same build, same walk, Navy cap. He swiped in at the east entrance and turned into OR 6. I hung up and headed that way. Didn't even think. Just moved. As I approached the OR wing, the motion-activated lights were already on. No surprise there. Someone must have walked through. But as I turned the corner into the corridor, it was empty, quiet, sterile. I opened the door to OR 6. It was dark inside, no overhead surgical lights, no machines on, just the stillness of a prepped but unused room. But it didn't feel empty. I stepped inside, checked the corners, the supply stand behind the drape cart. Nothing. Then I noticed something that didn't belong. A faint scent, like surgical prep, chlorhexidine and latex, strong, fresh. I turned to leave, and that's when Julian, one of our scrub techs, appeared behind me in the hallway, pale and wide-eyed. "You saw him too?" he asked. I froze. "Who?" He swallowed hard. "Dr. Barrett. Just now. I passed this hall, looked in, and someone in surgical scrubs was standing by the Mayo stand. I assumed he had come in after all. But he hadn't. We both knew it. He was still out of state." The rest of the night spiraled into controlled chaos. Security reviewed the badge log. The east or corridor door had been opened at 3:16 a.m. No user ID, just an entry event. No name attached. That's not supposed to happen. All staff access is logged and linked to individual credentials. We checked the cameras. Nothing. No footage of anyone entering OR 6. No one in the hallway. Nothing showing the door opening or closing. Just empty halls, time-stamped with a door that had definitely opened. The room was re-cleaned, re-sterilized. We moved the case to another OR entirely. And nobody, not anesthesia, not the backup surgeon, not the nursing staff, wanted to work in OR 6 the rest of that week. I asked Dr. Barrett about it when he returned 3 days later. He gave me a tired look and said, "I was halfway across the state with my daughter that night. There's security footage and toll booth logs proving it." Then he added, softer, "But I've heard the stories before. I just didn't think I'd be part of one." No one talks about OR 6 anymore. We still use it. Cases go in and out. But if something falls, if a light flickers, if a shadow passes in your peripheral vision, you don't acknowledge it. You keep your head down, focus on the instruments, do your job. Because once a surgeon walked into that room, the only problem he wasn't there. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this growing community. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps these creepy, fascinating, and sometimes comforting stories alive. We'd love to hear from you. If you've experienced something eerie, unexplained, or deeply moving, Feel free to share your own story in the comments below. You never know, your story might be the next one featured. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to help keep the chills coming. We couldn't do this without you. See you in the next one.